Okay, well, it is Monday. It is Monday, December 20th, 2021, and I'd like to open the meeting, the Board of Health.
Is there any way we can turn up the speaker's microphone?
Oh, maybe I'm just not speaking into it here. How's that? Is that better? Is that better?
More or less it's the same, but continue. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we're here today to discuss the 32 Hemlock Street hearing, drinking water contamination, allegations, possible remediation, action, testimony, discuss possible votes. At this point in time, I would like to turn the meeting over to our representative and our attorney, Mr. Bowen. Attorney Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Okay, so who do we have here from the complainant?
We have their attorney, Adrian. I'm sorry, I forgot how to.
I believe Attorney Lassette is for the respondent.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we have.
Lawrence Sparks, I thought was the counsel for who next?
Is anybody here for the witness?
Yeah, just both of them. I'm sorry?
Okay, Mr. and Mrs.
Yes.
How do you do?
I think they're.
And then Attorney Lassette for the respondent. Anybody else? Attorney Lassette?
No, no others.
No.
To the witnesses, is your attorney no longer involved in the process?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
We are unable to hear when the next speak. I don't know if they're out away from the microphones, but.
Yeah, that's fair. Is there any way that we can get the witness a microphone?
Do you want me to move over here and have it sit?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have to apologize for the clanging in the background in my office. I've got old-fashioned steam heat in this building.
Steam heat is good heat. Okay. Okay, I think we're ready here.
Okay, thank you. Now, to Mr. and Mrs. Whitnack, what's the situation at the property right now?
We have drinking water.
You have drinking water.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Has there been any more testing involving contamination?
No.
Okay. And at this point, what is it that you would ask the board to do?
That's a very difficult question to answer, sir, because to this point, nothing has been done on the other side of the stone wall by the people at 32 Hemlock Street to mitigate the problem that started this whole mess. Nothing. I have complied with this board from day one by not chlorinating my well and getting water established into my house until the end of October, waiting for their engineer or water company to come in and test our well like we had been asked to do. Amy Luginball came in on September 2nd, which she was not supposed to be there, and I explained to her that she needed to leave and talk to her attorney. And again, she came back on September 22nd, 15 minutes after I had left the property, leaving my wife at home, and she came into the yard with somebody else trailing in a pickup truck, and my wife almost had a heart attack because she thought we were being robbed. We were supposed to have been given 48-hour notice of anybody coming to our property to test the water. That never happened. Adrian was supposed to talk to our attorney, and every time there was an issue, he would not answer any phone calls or emails from her. And through this whole process, every time there was a town meeting that was canceled, it ended up costing us close to $1,000 to retain a lawyer. For what? You want me to ask or tell you what I want from this board? I would like to see a trench dug from one end of that property to the other, in a sediment pond dug out in the front, so the water from that property runs into the sediment pond and never filters into Tinkerville Brook. Because they are in the process of leaving the property, selling the property. We have a possible dead pig buried in the backyard that who knows when that's going to pop out of the ground and come flowing back across the stone wall onto my property. The state law says that when you raise farm animals, no leachate, no runoff from any animal waste or liquid is allowed to come onto a neighboring property. That can still happen, has been happening all summer long. That's what contaminated my well and continues to contaminate my backyard, unless the E. coli is dead in the ground. They never did any testing to prove that it has dissipated. I am over $35,000 in debt, and I came to this board back in June asking that something be done so this would not happen. I was assured it was not. I was being a little apprehensive. My question then was, if it does, who pays me? The neighbors? If they were any kind of a neighbor, they would have contacted their insurance company, had contacted us, and see what they could do to help us out. Zero. Nothing has happened. Nothing has happened as yet. I would like something to be done. You tell me what you can offer.
Well, that's not how it works.
I understand that. You asked me a question.
I wanted to go down and address some of the points that he raised. First off, he said that nothing has been done. So first off, we immediately complied and removed animals while we still challenged the fact that they weren't proved to be the source of that contamination. We had a well system that was over 30 years old.
I disagree with you, sir. I have proof.
I don't care if you are. You're a liar.
Hold on, everybody. Mr. Hudnak, you are allowed to speak without interruption. We're
Yes,
going
sir.
to afford the same courtesy to Attorney Lissette.
Okay.
Please continue,
That's
Attorney.
right.
Thank you, Counsel, Mr. Brown. So first of all, we 2 weeks ago put down 75-foot tarp after having negotiated with Attorney Sparks, who is the complainant's counsel. We went back and forth over area, distance, and sufficiency, and we have an email chain that on several occasions she said, if you all put down a 75 square foot area, of tarp, we will dismiss the action. And after the tarping was put down, we're told that there must have been a miscommunication, and that wasn't the number that her client had come to her with. But we, in good faith, put down tarping, even though we believe that tarping is actually going to exacerbate whatever problems they're claiming. We still believe that there are bovines in a neighboring field, and that is likely the source of contamination. Cows have been raised in a neighboring field for many years. We were hoping at this juncture to have the opportunity to speak with their testing expert. We had some questions about the chain of custody for the samples, as well as the sufficiency of the exploration of the elevation on site, the direction of hydrology, and what the report actually says. We would still be open to going into the nature of that report with Hutniks if they are familiar with it. But to their comments that we were not attempting to test, they got a no trespass order on us and prevented our testing officer from arriving here from coming in. I have been communicating with Attorney Sparks about when we would come to do testing, and apparently between clients and counsel there was I guess a brief misunderstanding, and then by the time that we had it sorted out, the testing officer returned to the water treatment plant where he worked. We proposed a date for him to come back within a couple of days, and at that point, Hutnik said they did not want to have testing performed any longer, and they were going to chlorinate the well because they waited long enough. But we had a back and forth for a long time. In the middle of the summer, it was very difficult to find a testing company that would take on a job of this size because it was fairly small, and because we were asking for bacterial testing as well as characterization of hydrology. So, a couple months did pass where we contacted over 16 companies, and we were not able to get any company that wanted to do that. So we ended up reducing the scope of testing. By the time we were able to have someone come out, we were then barred from entering the property on 2 occasions, one to try and do a kitchen sink test and one to do a test with a third-party expert because they wanted somebody other than Amy to put the water in the cup. It's the same chain of custody challenge that they, I guess, didn't want to couch for their sample, but the animosity that this situation has created forced my clients to want to relocate out of town. They thought that the town was hostile to them, and ended up selling their property in significant part because they felt like they weren't getting a fair deal, and that they thought that, especially with the posh that had occurred in the summer, that they were being penalized for something that they hadn't done and that hadn't been proven as a liability to them. The depth of factual inquiry that this matter requires at this point is better suited to the civil court, because we would have to go through the expert's testimony on this. The type of relief that the complainant has asked for here is excessive and at this point no longer an emergency. They said already that the well has been chlorinated, that an impermeable tarp has been put down. Animals haven't been there for 6 months, which, if folks will recall from our first hearing, the amount of time that the Board of Health experts said would leach or would biologically decompose any bacterial elements that were present in the soil. And if there is current contamination, I would say that is even better evidence that the source of the contamination is likely the bovine fields adjacent to this property, which are still being used for agricultural purposes and have never been tested or examined. But if we do have time today, I would like to ask the complainants a few questions about their report and about the nature of hydrology and about their the location of their well relative to test sites and so forth.
All right. I'll allow that in a minute. Would Mr. and Mrs. Hutnik like to offer a response?
Show them these.
I have a picture. I'm going to pass it around.
Pass the other one around the other way.
That's the covering they put on a 75 square foot area. 75 square feet was the size of the pig pen. That's what one of the town officials had said from day one, after he saw the landscape, that area needed to be covered to stop the pig E. coli virus from coming through the stone wall.
Mr. Hutnik,
That was-
may I ask a question? Is that 75 square foot area now covered?
No,
No.
sir, it is not.
Okay.
They laid out a piece of plastic that is 2 feet wide by 75 feet long. And these are the pictures that I am passing around. 75 feet by 2 feet is 150 square feet. 75 by 75 square feet is 5,625 square feet, and that's the area that was supposed to have been tarped according to what was written back in the July meeting by this Board of Health.
Okay, Mr. Hudnak, if you could just hold there for a second. Attorney Lassen, what do you have to say about a 75-foot long by 2-foot piece of tarp, if that's the case, and whether that is an effective cover?
So the length along the shared boundary between the properties is 75 feet. We offered that several weeks ago prior to hearing, because we said if you are insistent upon having an impermeable boundary along the property margin, would a 75-foot sheet be amenable? Is that something you all would be interested in? And we communicated with their counsel about that. We did not offer a 5,625 square foot coverage. That was beyond what we were extending. In fact, that wouldn't have been settlement. That would have been, I guess, what they were pushing for. But we go back to the position that the original order that the board had issued when they said cover with an impermeable surface had the effect of being a recommendation because it wasn't accompanied by a finding fact. And without a finding of fact, you can't issue an order. There wasn't at that time a notice of a violation. There wasn't a finding of fact made by the board. So when they said cover with an impermeable surface, that had the effect of being advisory. And at first we said before that, as an advisory opinion, we'd like to have an expert look at it because we believe that if we were to cover soil, that would cause turbulence and immobilize whatever is present on the surface.
So did you have, if I may interrupt, did you have an expert look at it? And if so, what did that person say about a cover in the, I'll call it the Big Bend area?
We did not have a soil test expert come out because by the time that we had lined up our expert, that was after the no trespass order was put in place and the well had been chlorinated, so we decided to discontinue that testing because we thought it would be moot.
No, but in terms of the effectiveness of a cover in the Big Bend area, did your expert make any recommendations?
We didn't bring the expert out because the other testing wasn't able to happen.
Okay.
May I say something?
Sure, if you just identify yourself before you speak. Just
I'm
like
Gail Hutnak.
Thank you, Ms. Hutnak.
And I can't tell you how stressful it was to have Adrian and his clients decide that an engineer to do water testing in my kitchen was the people we thought, which we believe, in our opinion, caused all this problem. To do a water test in a kitchen, you have to go into someone's house and stand there for 30 minutes with the sink running so that the water is not from the pipes but from the well itself. I've had the thing tested several times now in this last year and before that too. So I know what I'm talking about. And the stress of having her come through my door, let alone stand in my kitchen. She's never been in my house. I've never been in hers. I can't tell you how intimidating, and I believe Attorney Adrian Lassen did this on purpose, just to stall and make it more difficult. They didn't even try to test the well until the 2nd of September. That's the first time, and she just popped in. Like, what if we weren't home? The second time, Steve wasn't home. I was home alone. I was so frightened when 2 cars drove into my yard. No one got out of the car right away. When she finally got out of the car, she threw her hands up in the air, and then I went right to the door and I said, you can't be here. You need to leave. I'm calling the police. What did she do? She ran up to the door and bang, 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 like that, on my door, till I was screaming and calling 911 at the same time. I can't live like this. I can't. I'm afraid of them. I can't live like this. I've lived in my house for 50 years. And now, it's not a home anymore. It's just someplace to go at night. This has to stop. And part of this is their attorney he's called me twice when I told him I had counsel. That's not right. He hasn't been right or fair through this whole thing.
Attorney Bowen,
A couple points to respond.
Yeah.
Number one, the Board of Health's original order did say that testing was to be permitted. The first time that Amy attempted to test, she knocked on the front door and said, "I'd like to come in and take a water test," and take it over to a testing company in a sealed container, and refused access. We then tried to find a company that was a third party that could go to the address, and as I mentioned earlier today, in the height of summer, it was very difficult to find a testing company that would be able to provide a hydrology opinion as well as do water testing. Eventually, we reduced the scope of what we had asked for to simply performing a water test, and we did correspond through counsel and came on one of the 3 dates their counsel provided. The ultimate confirmation, when 3 dates were provided, 2 of them had passed. We had written back saying, we'll take the third date, but there was some ambiguity about the time of day. One email had said, I guess from their counsel, between, I think it was 9 and 11, and we came at 11 believing that that's what that meant. Whereas I think their counsel expected a third and final confirmation that said, we therefore choose 11 o'clock. But we came with an expert who was a third-party professional, who was a hydrologist who could do the testing, and who refused access. To answer the accusation that I called a represented party twice, that is false. On the first lab test that later on was removed from evidence, there was a number at the top. I thought that was the number of the laboratory when I called it. The first time, the person who picked up the phone hung up immediately. The second time, she identified herself as Ms. Hubneck and said, "No, call me." I said, "Oh, I apologize. I thought this was the laboratory telephone number," and did not call again. I take ethics rule, I think in this case 4.1, not to contact a represented party, very seriously. At the time, she was not represented, and had I been told that she had representation or was getting representation, I would not have attempted to reach her. I believe that was that addressed the 2 points that she had just raised. But I wanted to also ask if my client had anything to add about the circumstances of the test when she attempted to enter the property with an expert.
Sorry, my voice is really bad. I've been sick. The day that I went with our expert, I did not hear her say anything. I did not see her, so I went to knock on the door, and that's when she told me that she was calling 911. And I told my expert myself we were moving ourselves from the property, and that was the end of that. I did not hear her prior to that. But as soon as she said she was calling me, that she didn't want me there, I left.
Thank you. So returning to, I guess, the matter at hand, I don't see why the board is holding on to jurisdiction of what appears to be a civil dispute between 2 former neighbors. It no longer appears to be an emergency, as there is drinking water on the site, and when it's presented with a broad question of what relief can you give me, I think that goes beyond the discretion and jurisdiction of the board. We don't believe that there are any current pending orders that we're not in compliance with, and further, we've gone above and beyond those orders that were accompanied with conclusions that were binding. To the extent that the complainants would like to present additional information relating to the BAL laboratory testing, I would like to examine their evidence and ask them a few questions about it. But other than that, I think that this doesn't need to be before the Board of Health, and better be served in civil court.
Attorney Bowen?
Yes, sir.
I do have something to add to this.
Please.
Okay. As far to the point that Attorney Lassant had made about the bovine, the bovine property, I guess I would call it that. We went, as a board, we went to visit the property. This was when everything began, and it was just awful. It was saturated, it was like a sponge. There's no way, I'm not a professional, okay? I'm not speaking as a professional, but there is no way that that area did not contaminate their property. As far as I'm concerned, and I have pictures to prove it, that was definite contamination from the property. No doubt about it. And as far as I'm concerned, and this is the way I feel, as far as the board is concerned, yes, it is a civil matter, but we can be witnesses to this if it goes to court. And I'd certainly be willing to witness, for sure. If I'm out of line, Attorney Bowen, you can respectfully let me know. But that's the way I feel.
Not at all.
Okay.
We're
Just, the gentleman.
Attorneys, hold on. We're just trying to get at
The person who spoke.
you can wait. We're just trying to get at the truth of the matter, and then the relevance of the truth of the comments being offered can be weighed in light of the court's present jurisdiction. So go ahead, Attorney Wilson.
Oh, I said, what was the name of the last person to speak?
Oh, Bob Brazo.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yep.
It's the chairman.
The chairman, Bob Brazo.
Certainly.
All right. Do Mr. and Mrs. Swetnak have anything else they wish to offer?
No, I want to see what the board's going to do.
Okay, and what are you asking the board to do?
Whatever they want.
That's not what you're asking. Let me
No, because I told you what I wanted, and you're telling me that that's not the way it works. So what can I say? What can I add? I would like to get paid for my expenses, but that ain't gonna happen.
Well, Mr. Hudnak, as you know, the Board of Health doesn't have the authority to order anyone to pay anyone's expenses. Do you understand that?
Of course I do.
Okay, so you understand then that it's not reasonable for you to ask the Board of Health to order that Attorney Lasen's client pay your expenses. Do you understand that?
Of course I do.
Okay. And Mrs. Hudnak, I was very moved by your testimony about the anxiety that you and stress that you felt. But do you understand that the Board of Health doesn't have the jurisdiction to award you damages for any pain and suffering that you may have experienced? Do you understand?
Of course we do.
I understand that, and we solved that. We went to the police. We got a no trespassing order. So she nor he, the two of them from 32 Hemlock Street, can never come on my property again. And if they do, they'll be arrested.
No, I understand that, ma'am. But what I'm asking, and Mr. Hudnak, did you have a comment? It ended in the word "you." I didn't hear the first word.
I don't understand.
Ended in the
No,
word.
you said something, and then it was something "you." I didn't catch all of it.
I don't remember saying anything like that.
All right, we'll let it pass. So, Mrs. Hudnak, do you understand that the Board of Health doesn't have the authority to award you damages for any pain and suffering that you've experienced?
Was not asking the board for that.
Okay, good, because they couldn't give it to you.
Well, we know
So-
that.
But I wanted to explain to them how difficult this has been for us, and to you,
Yeah.
and to
No,
Attorney Lasen, because
no, and you've explained it very clearly, and you know, I can, you really put across the pain that you've gone through. So the question is now, do you have drinking water right now?
we do.
So, members of the board, you know, your jurisdiction here is to make sure that a health risk is being rectified. Your jurisdiction is a matter of the present rather than past history. Your jurisdiction is health-related matters, not tort-related matters. Tort-related matters are things like pain and suffering, trespass, intentional infliction of emotional distress, allegations of unethical behavior by counsel. I said allegations, Attorney Lissette. You know, those matters don't fall within your jurisdiction. The question in front of you right now is, number one, do the Hutnacks have drinking water, potable drinking water? The answer is yes. Now, as to sources of contamination, you know, number one, you'd want to have some expert testimony that it came from one source or another, and I'm not hearing that. And that there was a present danger from that contamination. And I haven't heard any testimony on that. So
It was all in that report, that very expensive water report that we had done by Wilcox and
Barrett Smith.
Barrett Smith was the name of the engineer who came out. That it came from the water source, from the pig pit. And that was all given to the board. The pictures, the videos were given to the board.
The first 2 water samples that we took and took to 2 separate labs, the samples came back. One of them came back from ET&R as positive for E. coli.
20,000.
That was 20,600 CFUs per 100 milliliter of E. coli chloroform bacteria. The other lab came back, Neshoba Valley was positive for E. coli chloroform bacteria. That was in July. The pigs were removed. Barrett Smith came out and took his water sample, and we got the results of that mid-October. So he came out toward the end of September, and he sampled the water from the kitchen sink that was still hooked up to the shallow well.
In September, yeah.
And that sample came back positive for E. coli and chloroform bacteria, and the bacteria had dissipated to 2,800 CFUs per 100 milliliter, and they told us that is an indication that the pigs were the source of the E. coli. It was not because of the bovine in the neighbor's property, because the bacteria would have still been higher.
Objection, that's hearsay.
Okay, Attorney Lissette, your objection is noted. However, there are no strict rules of evidence in this case, and the board will weigh the testimony accordingly. Mr. Hutnak, do you have, the pigs have been removed, do you have a test that indicates that contamination is ongoing?
No, I don't.
And we can't afford to test anymore.
I'm sorry, what was that, ma'am?
I said we can't afford to test anymore.
No, okay, that's fair. So, what, if the board were to order that the entire pig pen be covered, what evidence in the record is there that that order would be justified by a test or a support or any facts? Just please help me with that.
At this point in time, covering any part of that area is absolutely mute. And that's what they were waiting for, was for this whole thing to subside, and they wouldn't have to spend the money. It was all on us.
Okay, members of the board, I think there you have it. The only issue that was really before the board was whether you were going to order that the pig pen be completely covered or not. Mr. Hutnak has said that that's unnecessary, that it's moot. You know, while the Hutnaks have put on a strong case about pain and suffering that they've experienced and, you know, interference with their quality of life and past damages to the well, those are matters for the court to consider. If ordering the pig pen to be covered is moot, then I don't see what more you can do here. You can't award them damages. This does seem like a matter for the court to address and for the Hutnaks to bring their claim there to recover any damages and suffering they've experienced.
Attorney Bowen, again, Robert Brazo, Chairman, Board of Health.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, should we, I'm really not sure how we're going to go, you know, what route we're going to take here, but should we have a vote on whether or not we feel the responsibility lies on, you know, I forget the name, Amy and her husband? Should that? No. Okay.
No, those aren't matters within the jurisdiction of the Board of Health.
Okay.
You know, scheduling conflicts, calls by attorneys,
Sure.
Who showed up when, how long the faucet should have run, you know, that's past history. Your concern is with whether there is a health risk right now.
Okay.
What I was waiting to hear was whether the pig pen was an ongoing health risk that could be ameliorated by covering. The response to my question was that that's a moot point now. So in terms of your jurisdiction, this is now a moot point. It's up to the Hutnaks and their counsel if they choose to bring their claims in Superior Court, District Court, I suppose, but probably Superior Court, to recover for any losses that they may have suffered.
So there's very little we can do at this point.
Well, I think that's the point.
Okay.
And I think at this point, you know, without any new evidence, it doesn't really serve any purpose for the board to continue to hear the matter. There's drinking water at the site, there's potable water. Why the well was ruined, that's a civil matter for the parties to flesh out with expert witnesses and in front of a judge.
Right.
You know, even if we agreed with everything I said, we don't have the power to order payment of damages or to, you know, address things that happened in the past.
I understand.
Can I ask one thing of the board? You couldn't help us. Could you please change the bylaw or do something so that no one else has this kind of problem? If it hadn't been for COVID, and we would have still been watching our grandchildren, and I would have been making baby formula and all kinds of things for my grandchildren, this could have gotten really, really bad. The next family, it could kill. We got sick, but we didn't. This could kill somebody. This is a serious problem, and please.
We had, as a board, we had discussed possibly creating a bylaw for you know, something similar to this happening in the future. But I need Attorney Bowen's guidance for that. So that's the best I can offer you right now. But
If you've got some ideas for bylaw, I'm happy to help you
Sure.
hone them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know that out here in Mansfield, when we have issues relating to wetland delineation or zoning, or our planning board and our conservation commission, we often will do some inspection or testing ourselves. Perhaps the town could bring, or a proponent of a change would bring a matter up in a town meeting to see if your town could have a budget for testing drinking water as a state-funded issue. Because one of the major problems that both sides had throughout the course of this was determining as a question of fact whether or not there was a certain level of contamination, who had chain of custody, where the testing would occur, when it occurred, and that sort of thing could be done in-house by a professional, hired by the local government if they want to keep someone in-house who's capable of doing that sort of testing. Just off the top of my head, as a general comment from the public, I suppose.
Okay, I believe that everybody has said their piece. I don't know if there's anything else to add. Attorney Bowen, how do you feel? Should we end the meeting, or?
Well, Mr. Chairman, unless someone believes that a vote is necessary to take a particular action, then no vote is necessary.
Okay.
I have one question. I think the trench idea was something that we had talked about a long time ago, or a berm to divert any additional water runoff to go down the hill in a way. I mean, the brook is a subset, it's something different, and conservation probably more has to do with that. To prevent runoff, my thought, I guess, was that does contamination need to be proven through a sample that it was coming from that property in order to require a trench or a berm be created on that property? If there's no evidence no concrete evidence that contamination did in fact come from where we think it came from, then is it just we really can't have somebody go through that process of creating a berm or a trench to divert runoff? That's it.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yeah. Anytime you require someone to take a particular act, you want the act that you are requesting of them or ordering them to do to be based on some facts that give support for taking the action. So, for example, I think we know intuitively that if contamination was flowing from a particular direction through water flow, we know intuitively that digging a trench and somehow diverting it might be beneficial. However, pure intuition is probably not enough. You'd want to know hydrogeologically which way the water is flowing. You'd want to know whether the direction it was flowing was carrying the contaminants, whether there were contaminants. And you'd want to know that, with hopefully some engineering advice, whether a trench would actually be a good idea or would just simply be redirecting possible contamination to another site. So there's a lot that goes into ordering someone to do something, and it usually has to be based on what I would call, our usual intuition that we rely on. There's more of a standard of proof that applies. Thank you.
Okay.
That's kind of what I thought.
Yeah. Well, I guess we should conclude the meeting.
At least this section of it.
Yeah. I'd like to, at this point, dismiss the Hutnecks, and I'm sorry I cannot pronounce your names.
Mugenbold.
What is it? Lugenbogs from the meeting. We have to conclude this meeting,
I
okay?
don't think there's anything else we can do.
Yeah,
So, Mr. Chairman,
yes, Attorney.
if I may, just speaking from my experience of,
Yeah,
the apprehensions that remote participants usually feel in our COVID Zoom age, usually the participants don't like to go offline until the matter is completed.
okay.
And so I'd suggest that, unless you have some other business to take care of before the Board of Health tonight, that perhaps just a motion to adjourn the meeting might be in order.
Okay, then I make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
And I'll second.
Okay. Meeting is adjourned.